Hello, I'm Dr. Nimali Fernando, and I'm a pediatrician in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. I first want to thank the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority for making this project a reality. Thank you very, very much. I also wanted to just mention that today we will be taking questions through our chat. And we will spend some time in the second half of this program answering those questions. Those questions that we are not able to get to, we will be addressing after the program, and we'll be making those answers available to you. So let's get started. Again, my name is Nimali Fernando. I'm a pediatrician in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I'm also one of the founders of the Dr. Yum Project. The Dr. Yum Project is a nonprofit organization, and I thought I would spend the first few minutes giving you a little bit of background about who we are and what we hope to accomplish in this series today and in the next several weeks. We will be talking about parenting around food and making sure that while you're home with your children during this pandemic, that you have experiences and opportunities to present food in a joyful way that helps to build a healthy eater for a lifetime. So let me tell you first about the background of the Dr. Yum Project. As I said, we're a nonprofit organization in Fredericksburg, and our mission is to help families and communities overcome barriers to eating well. Now, those barriers can be a little bit different for each family or each community. And right now we find ourselves in a particularly challenging time with some new barriers around this pandemic. So I hope that we can share a lot of great tips and tricks for you to use with your children during this particularly challenging time. So the background of the Dr. Yum Project really comes from a desire to help children learn to eat better. In my community in Fredericksburg in the United States, I noticed a problem with children in learning to eat in a joyful way. And in our country, we have been seeing a very alarming increase in the rates of childhood obesity and also in diet-related illnesses. We also see a lot of children struggling to learn to eat in an appropriate way, and this can lead to feeding disorders. And for these reasons, I was particularly interested in helping families in my community learn to teach their children how to eat better and to address all of these issues that I was seeing so prevalently in our community. And so I started a website called Dr. Yum, and I put a lot of our family recipes on that website. And I noticed that when we provide hands-on recipes and ideas to families, that they have, they're empowered to have some real life tools and a toolbox to use to help their children learn to eat. And so this success really became a bigger effort and was sort of the birth of a larger community project called the Dr. Yum Project. And we have many programs that we have in our community to help families and children learn to eat. And we realized too that in order to change the habits of children, we had to change the habits of families. So, so one of our most dear programs to our hearts is the preschool nutrition program. And I'll be telling you a lot about that this morning because a lot of the concepts that we're going to present during this series comes from our experience teaching children to eat better in schools. So the series really is going to be covering a lot of different tips and ideas. And today's session will really be about mindfulness and teaching children how to be mindful when they are learning to eat. So just to give you an idea of where we are, We are in Fredericksburg, and that is about 50 miles south of the capital of Washington, D.C. And we started a preschool nutrition curriculum in schools in our area of the country in Central Virginia. And this program started as 8 lessons, teaching children how to enjoy food by a number of experiences, reading, movement, music, but also cooking in the classroom. And cooking with children is one of the greatest tools that we have to introduce the joy of food to children. And so this program really centers around cooking, but also around making friends with food, which we'll talk a lot about in the course of this series. I really got started developing this program with the help of a very dear friend who's a pediatric feeding specialist. I mentioned that feeding disorders become more and more prominent in the US, and I reached out to a pediatric feeding specialist who knows all about the development of feeding in children and how to help children through challenges of feeding. And we together wrote this curriculum called Dr. Yum's Preschool Food Adventure. And we asked schools in Central Virginia to be part of this pilot program back in 2013. This is what our program looks like now. And we've learned so much in 6 years about how children learn to become healthy eaters by implementing this program year after year over the past 7 years and improving the program with the help of a registered dietitian, preschool educators, a feeding specialist, and a number of teachers who've been using the program in our community. And we're so proud to have this version of our preschool curriculum now, which we have been able to research to see if it actually helps families and children to eat better in the home. So a few years ago, we actually asked teachers to rate their students' feeding behaviors in a number of key areas to see if, after cooking with children and experiencing food in a joyful way in the classroom, if those feeding behaviors improved. And what we found is over 9 feeding behaviors, the children actually were eating better, they were refusing food less, and they were enjoying food more. So we really feel confident that this approach works, which is why we wanted to share it with you today. We also have with my feeding specialist friend, we wrote a book together called Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. And in that book, we have really tried to help parents understand, and we hope that you'll understand this too through the course of this series. Feeding is a developmental process. It is a joyful process, but it also has key developmental windows. And so we want to make sure that parents understand that they have control in helping their child's development and seizing the opportunity in many of these developmental windows. Let me just show you about where our program has gone to in this past 2 years. We now have expanded this program after really recognizing the power of this joyful approach in cooking with children. We've expanded it to so many areas outside of our community in Fredericksburg, Virginia, including West Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Minnesota, Alabama, Iowa, Missouri, and even California. We also have expanded out of the continental US into Canada and Puerto Rico. So it's very exciting. We're so excited to share what we've learned with you during the course of this series too. This is my book, as I mentioned, Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. What we've done in the book also is we have introduced parenting principles. And this is what I'm most excited to share with you, is that feeding is a developmental process, but we also have control as parents in how we unfold that development and how we can respond to feeding challenges. Throughout our book, we have identified these different parenting strategies. And through the course of this series, we will visit each one of these parenting strategies and help you understand how you can utilize them to help build and raise a healthy eater. Strategies like parenting bravely and patiently and mindfully, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So let me first say that I hope that by spending time with us, you can learn that eating is not just about putting food into your body. It's really an immersive experience that can be enjoyed using all of our senses. And when we show children the beauty of food and the joy that it brings, we are also teaching them mindfulness. So the tip today is parenting mindfully. So our advice on this tip is really to be present with your child as you prepare and enjoy food together, and take time to explore food with all of your senses as you make a recipe together. Slow down and be grateful for the food you prepare and the time you spend with family. We are spending a lot of time with family, and it's very precious, and it's time that we may not get back, and it's time that we should really savor. And by spending that time with your children and really enjoying the meal together, you're showing them that food is a beautiful thing. So I wanted to turn the program over to two very special people at the Dr. Yum Project. We'll be working as a team to show you a lot of these strategies through the course of the next several weeks. First is Sarah Moran. She is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and Wendy Cannon, who is a cooking instructor and outreach specialist, and she's also our preschool curriculum coordinator and happens to be a seasoned preschool teacher. She has a beautiful way of relaying her joy of food to her students, and we're really hoping you'll enjoy their presentation today on parenting mindfully in the kitchen.
Okay, so hi everybody. We're excited to talk to you today. And just so you know, we have some things we'll be demonstrating and showing you here, but also Nimali will be throwing up some slides here and there too to illustrate some of the points. So we'll be flipping a little bit between us and then also some images that you will see to help show you a little bit more of how you can do these things with your kids at home and really help them explore food and add some mindfulness to your approach to food. You also should have your handout. So that looks like this, that kind of has an overview of what we'll be talking about today. And there's also a section a little past the halfway point for you to write some notes when we get into the different activities. And of course, you can take notes all around the edges or however makes sense to you. So the first thing we wanted to talk with you about is really making friends with food. This is something that we talk about a lot with parents. We use it a lot in the preschool curriculum because we want kids to have fun around food, feel comfortable around food. And a lot of times for kids, food can feel like a stressful thing, and it's also just a new thing. They're learning about food all the time. Everything is new to them, and food is part of that. So we just really want to focus on having that joyful experience and helping them become more familiar with different foods in different ways so that they can feel really comfortable and confident and build those skills over time so that as they grow and develop and eventually become adults, they'll have that familiarity and they'll have those skills that they need going forward when it comes to eating and cooking. Also, when we're thinking about making friends with food, we really encourage you to help your kids explore food with all of their senses. So a lot of times when we're talking about food and eating, we think about just taste. But we really want to help kids explore food with all their senses, what a food looks like, how it feels, how it smells, really exploring food in all of the different ways that we can. And this helps kids have more fun. It helps them become more curious and interested in learning about food. And it also can help decrease their stress and anxiety around food, because food becomes a fun, friendly thing, and it's something that they get to explore and learn about with you.
So as Nimali said, I am a preschool teacher. So, and I have used Dr. Yum's program with my children for the past 7 years. And what I see is in these formative years between ages 3 and 5, we're able to really impact the familiarity with foods. And I find students coming back years later excited, tell Dr. Yum I tried spinach or whatever, because they're excited and they had a kind of a stress-free introduction. And I think sometimes parents are so concerned that my child's not getting enough nutrition, they're not eating enough, they're not trying enough things, that meal times become pressure filled. And so what we're able to do with this experience is take that stress away and make it fun. So so our research shows we've used this with children with special needs as well, and they need even more time to experience foods. So we are going to be talking about peppers today. And so I can give you an example in a special needs classroom where the pepper lesson was the lesson for that month, but they didn't just do it on one day. They spent the entire month cutting peppers. Kids were digging their hands in there, pulling out the seeds. They got familiar with the smell of peppers. They passed it around. They could feel it. They could hear it when they're breaking it or chopping it. They could hear that crunch. So, so those familiar experiences then build the base for a possible taste. But taking the taste off the table really relieves that stress for kids.
And you can see a picture here. These are some of Wendy's students chopping away and cooking. And you can see, you know, they've got all these different things that they're working on, but they're getting that experience to touch the food, feel what it's like to cut it, and really just all of the senses of all the smells that are going around that room while all the kids are cutting. So cooking is a really important part of this, of helping kids become more familiar with foods and being just mindful in general. It helps them to have that experience with the foods. And so involving kids in your cooking as much as possible, it helps them to get to know the foods better, but it also helps them build important skills so that they are learning those cooking skills at the same time. Another thing that is really great to discuss with kids is talking about how food grows and where it comes from. So we have the pepper lesson here. Wendy will show you. Oh, we've got slides.
Oh.
Here we go. Noali's going to show you.
She's talking cooking with kids.
So there are some kids that have been cooking together in one of our classes here in the kitchen. And you can see they're all having a great time and they're having fun. So talking with kids about how food grows and where it comes from is another part of increasing this mindfulness that we're talking about today. So food doesn't just appear out of nowhere, right? It grows somewhere, someone has to produce it, whether we're growing it ourselves in our home gardens or in our communities, or it's coming from somewhere a little bit farther away from a farmer in another part of the world maybe, and we're accessing that food. So teaching kids about where food comes from, but also how it grows, whether it grows on a vine like the cucumber illustration there, or it grows on a tree like a pomegranate or an avocado. Some foods are roots and they grow under the ground like carrots and beets. So teaching kids about how food grows helps increase their knowledge, increase their understanding of food and where it comes from. And it's just another way for them to experience food as well, whether that's visiting a farm or growing food themselves at home and seeing how a little seed can produce a plant that produces a lot of food, or how a tree can produce food. It just is another way to engage them and help them to learn about food.
And I'll just add that when we're talking about how food grows in my classroom, I would say maybe Nimali could take off that slide for a minute. Yeah, there we go. So I would use this visual with the children for the pepper lesson, and I would have already had them guess, where do you think this pepper grows? Do you think it grows on a tree? Do you think it grows in the ground, under the ground? And so then we're able to illustrate that, oh yes, it's it grows from the ground and it comes off of this stem here, and it's a fruit on this tree. And so we talk a lot about like what part of the plant that you eat. And it's so fascinating because sometimes you're eating the root, the tuber, the stem, the flower, or the leaves. And for some recipes, we're able to combine all of those. And the kids get really excited when we can talk about, for broccoli salad, that we're eating the flower of the broccoli and the stem of the broccoli, and we're having the root of the carrot, and we're having the fruit of the grapes. So it's really exciting to start making those connections with how things grow. So the other thing that we do is we talk about what food looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like. And so we would use all of our senses. And so you can see that we have some mindful kids here. You can see she's looking, using her sense of sight to look at the beet. And this little guy is smelling that kiwi and using his sense of smell. And she is feeling the bumpiness of that pineapple. And our last guy is actually taking a taste of that delicious avocado. And so we want the children to really realize that food is a multisensory experience and take that pressure off the taste. And so what we would do with peppers is we would have a whole lot of different peppers here. And you can see the different shapes, colors, and sizes, and we would pass them around and let the kids talk about it. And they could say, oh, this one's long, and this one's small and round, and you know, this one's really skinny. So, so we want them to feel it and smell it. And of course, once you get into the lesson, the smells will become really apparent.
And it's also an opportunity for kids to make different creative comparisons. So they get to learn how to describe things, how things are similar, how they're different. So, you know, just looking at these peppers, we can compare these two together and their size. We can also talk about different colors, different shades of green even. You know, this is a really dark green, this is a light green. And you can even compare things to other foods. So you might talk about, you know, this pepper is red. Can you think of some other foods that are red? And they might say pomegranates or cherries or strawberries or watermelon, but it helps them make those connections as well as they're describing.
And this little shape of one even looks like a little strawberry
It does.
too. Yeah, so cute.
So that's another way you can make connections. And especially if we're thinking about maybe a child who's a little more hesitant of trying a certain food, if you can make that connection to a food that they already really like or are really familiar with, that can be another way to bridge that gap and help them eventually be ready to taste by making comparisons to things they already know or they already like, and helping them see how those foods are similar.
And as Dr. Young mentioned on the development of feeding, what you're also worried about with children, and especially since many of you will be schooling at home, is you want to worry about their other development, their development of language. So in making those creative comparisons, you're building language. You're talking about similarities and differences, opposites. You're talking about whether this is smooth or bumpy, and you can come up with lots of different vocabulary words that will build that language. Then you're also going to be building other developmental skills that children need as they're growing, such as fine motor, gross motor, and you know, any of those that we would be working on in school, you can work on at home.
Now, another thing that we like to talk about with kids is what food does for their body. So this is the nutrition part of things. And kids can really understand nutrition concepts. It's just about explaining things to them in an age-appropriate way, ways that they can understand. So one way we do that is by talking about vitamins and minerals as superpowers. So we talk with kids about how, you know, different foods have different superpowers, and those superpowers help our body. So this is something that you can discuss with your kids, and you can see some of our powers there. We have little graphics too. So like vitamin C fights germs. So you see the little germ there and he's locked up. Vitamin K heals your cuts and scrapes, which is a big one for kids, especially because they're always falling down and everything. So that's something that they can really connect with. Folate helps you grow. So helping kids understand that, different foods have different nutrients, and those superpowers in those foods help our body do different things. And it's something that can also really help them to understand just how their body works, learning more about the different parts of their body, learning about digestion or their bones or any different body part, and how food helps us stay healthy and helps us grow. Now, one thing to think about when we're talking about nutrition is we want to talk about nutrition away from the dinner table. So we don't want to discuss nutrition topics really, or make that the teaching time for nutrition when we're actually eating. Because when we're eating, that's more about experiencing the food, having time together with family and friends, building relationships, and having a really joyful, fun, comfortable experience. And when we talk about nutrition at meal times, what it can do is make that fun, joyful family time feel like a stressful time, or like you need to eat this because it has this nutrient. So instead of nutrition becoming a fun thing or something that helps kids be more curious, it can feel like pressure and like something that I don't want to learn about. So talking about nutrition when you're maybe growing a food or chopping food, preparing food, shopping for food, making a grocery list, whatever it is, those are great times to talk about those nutrition concepts and help kids learn that. And then when it's time to eat, we're eating, we're having conversation together, and we're just enjoying that time to bond and share food together, and also just enjoy our meal.
Yeah, and I'll say in the preschool setting, we talk about the superpowers and we investigate the food and we cheer for like what it will do for our body. So, we have larger visuals. Vitamin C is right here, and this says fights germs, and my kids will throw their hands up in the air and yell, fights germs! And so we get really excited about the superpowers, but we are experiencing learning during a learning time, not during an eating time. And so then we're also experiencing the food during food preparation, but then when it's snack time, that's just an eating time, not a learning time. So it's really important to do that at home as well.
And just so you know, if we're talking about peppers today, the superpowers for peppers are vitamin A, which helps your eyes see. I think we have a graphic for that.
Have that. Helps your eyes see.
So that's a great one. We have vitamin B6.
And they love this one, boost your brain. We just tap our brain right here, boost your brain. And of course, the wonderful vitamin C, which fights germs. And so I always talk about that peppers are awesome. They're an ABC fruit that has all of those wonderful nutrients.
Okay, so those are some of the key concepts, but now let's talk a little bit more about how you can actually do that with your kids and different ways to think about it.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the way we would do a pepper lesson, and it's easy to replicate this at home. And so, I would make it a science experiment, and we are going to actually investigate the seeds of the pepper. So if you can just cut the pepper here, so that this one, I'm gonna have to cut it a little bit more. That's not a very big seed pocket. Okay, so that you can expose the seeds right there. This is really fascinating anyway. The kids will be super interested to see that. And then, I can already smell bell pepper. Can you smell bell pepper?
Yes.
And so my classroom smells like peppers on the pepper day, and hopefully your kitchen will when you do this at home. And so you can see those little seeds are right in there. And what I have, and I think Dr. Young will be able to put up a picture here in a minute of my kids actually doing this lesson, but I have magnifying glasses and a bunch of different sizes of tweezers, even the teeny tiny tweezers. And this is actually a strawberry huller, which is actually a good tweezer too. So whenever you're doing these pinching motions with your children, they're actually building that fine motor skill that they need for a tripod grip on a pencil or a pen. So you always want to be doing fine motor activities. Picking things up with tweezers is a great way to do that. So we'll have all these tweezers, and then the kids just sit and pluck the seeds out. You can save some for planting. You can count them. They can do a prediction of how many seeds they think are in a pepper. And I think Dr. Young can put up a slide now showing you my kids are very engaged always at the science table on peppers. So I think it's coming, but there are lots of ways that yeah, there they are. And so I'll tell you, the little guy in the yellow shirt with the green tray, he is a very hesitant eater. He maybe eats like 4 or so foods, to include pancakes, waffles, and some chips. So to see him digging in that pepper for about a good 15 minutes, he was pulling seeds out of that pepper. What he's doing is he's introducing the feel of that pepper to his hands. He's getting that bell pepper smell into his nose, and he's experiencing peppers in a low pressure, in a fun way, in a way that is a positive imprint of peppers, versus his only experience with peppers being somebody putting it on his plate and telling him to taste it. So we want to imprint positive experiences with food always.
And that's part of making friends with food.
Yeah.
Kids feeling comfortable around food, feeling like it's fun and not a scary thing. And so that really helps with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, thinking about the tweezers, I would also encourage you that it doesn't just have to be what we showed you today. You may have some other tools at home that the kids could explore the peppers with. If you use chopsticks in your eating, or want your kids to learn how to use chopsticks, this would be a great way for them to practice that same skill that you're doing with the tweezer.
Yeah.
So this is a way you can incorporate science. And what we're going to be showing you through these activities is that, you know, as you can see on the graphics here, food is a way to introduce a lot of other concepts and learning as well. So science is a great one, and that's what we just talked about. But now we're going to move on to art. So we have some art things, and Nimali, if you want to swap off the slide right now, we can show people what we have here. So you can do some real art with food, and there are a few different ways you can do it. So first, I guess we can talk about this. You can use paint and do little prints. So you can see how Wendy has cut this. And, you know, you could dip this in paint and make an art piece that could go on the wall. And you could do that with a lot of different fruits and vegetables if you want something a little more permanent. The downside to that is that you're putting paint on the food, and now the food is going to waste. So an alternative that doesn't waste any food and you can eat it when you're done is to do edible art. So we have an example here. I'm going to use this pepper. We have a beet hummus. So the beet gives it this really pretty purple color and makes it like a paint.
And we usually we don't really, when we take beet hummus to an event, usually we have our green hummus, which is made with spinach. We have our beet hummus, which is made with beets. And then we'll have a plain hummus or even our red pepper hummus. And often we'll just offer, would you like the purple hummus, the green hummus, or the orange hummus? And you would be surprised at how many kids are like, purple! They want the purple because it's so beautiful.
So I'm just going to take this little spatula and I'm going to spread some of this on here. And then you could do like on a plate if you wanted, but we have a little tortilla wrap here. You could use some kind of bread or whatever.
Any flatbread or anything.
But we're going to do a little stamp.
Cute. Look at that.
So we've got a fun shape.
And then you could stamp this up and add some vegetables in here and roll it up and eat it for lunch.
Right. And you could cut the pepper in different ways, so you're getting different cross sections, and kids that helps them kind of learn that spatial awareness and thinking about how all these pieces fit together. But that's a really simple way, using the food you already have and that you're going to eat, to help your child explore a little bit more. And then also, if you want to make something more permanent and do some painting, but you don't want to use the actual food, you can also do drawing or paintings of a pepper. So, you know, you could pick a pepper or even a bowl of peppers and have your kid draw a picture of it. So again, it's just incorporating food in all of these different areas of life, so kids get lots of different opportunities to explore and think about and experience food, and art can be another way that you can.
And there are different ways that you can create your own stamp. You can use a soft tile and actually carve into the soft tile and then paint over that and make a print that way. But you can create your own non-food ways to do permanent art as well. Yeah. And before we leave too soon off of activities and motor, I just want to encourage all of you to find some child-safe knives. You can find these on dryum.org on our website, and you can find them right in our store. But this is shaped like a little puppy dog. I don't know if you can see, there's an eyes, nose, and a tail, and this one has teeth, this one has no teeth. But these are transformative tools in our teaching kitchen, in our parenting classes, and in the preschool classrooms, because these knives are safe for children. It will not cut a finger, but it handily cuts anything, even to include a carrot. So we teach the children safe knife skills, and it's a really important skill for your children to help in the kitchen, is to have safe knife skills. So, yeah.
So another way that we can take our food learning outside of the kitchen and the cooking experience is to make community connections. So learning about and meeting and talking with people in your community who are involved in food. So that could be visiting a farm or a farmer, or going to a food market and talking to the people there who grow the food. It could also be talking with just someone who gardens and exploring their garden. And it could be talking to a really good cook or a chef and learning about how they use food in what they do. And it could even be just talking with a family member or a friend. If you know someone who grows food or who would love to cook with your child and teach them some of what they know, you can help build those community connections through food. Of course, eating is always a part of building those connections, but we can also think about all the people around us who are a part of food and eating, whether that's growing the food or cooking the food. It's a great way to build those connections and help your kids learn about food in another way.
So music is really a great thing to have going at all times. I'm a big fan of music. I always have music going in my house and in my classroom. And so a fun thing to do is to coordinate music with whatever food you're learning about. So perhaps for peppers, if we're making a salsa, I might put on some salsa music, and we could experience dancing around to salsa music, or you know, just experience another culture's music, which is wonderful. And what I also love to do with the peppers is, I'll just take this big yellow one. We put on some music and we play Pass the Pepper. And so if you've ever heard of a game called Hot Potato, we sit in a circle and pass the pepper around. You could do this around your, you know, you could just sit on the floor at your house and pass the pepper around, turn on some music, and someone is the one who turns off the music. And at a certain time, if the music turns off and you're holding the pepper, then you're out. And then it keeps going until there's one person left holding the pepper. So you can introduce music, movement, along with whatever food you're learning about.
Another thing you can talk about with your kids is food around the world. So all the foods we eat, you know, they originate in some part of the world. They may be used in a lot of parts of the world, or they may be used in fewer parts of the world, or grow in different places. So you can see for around the world, we have a little globe there. And using a globe or a map is a really good way you can do this. It's going to help your child learn that, you know, the world isn't just what they see around them, but it's a big place. There's a lot of different people in a lot of different places, and food comes from different places. So it's helping them learn about that broader sense of community and all the people around. And they're also learning geography. They're learning where these different places are and how they relate to each other. And, you know, with something like peppers, peppers are used in a lot of different cuisines all around the world, and there's so many different types. So, you know, this is a poblano. We have some sweet bell peppers here, but then you also have, yes, thanks, hold some of those for me.
Yes, I would love to.
We have a serrano pepper. This
Which
is
is a little bit hot.
Jalapeno, that's also a little hot. I think we have a habanero here. This is very hot. So you can talk about these different peppers. Some of them may be more popular in certain parts of the world than others, or used in different types of food around the world. So it's really important to expose kids to the foods of your culture and your family and what you typically eat so that they learn those foods and flavors of their community, but also to expose them to all the other foods and flavors around the world. It's just, again, increasing that familiarity and helping them learn that food can be used in a lot of different ways. And sometimes the way we use it depends on where we live.
And we find in the kitchen when we're doing classes or camps with kids is that we'll often do an experience around the world type of thing where we make a passport and we try cuisines from different areas in the world. And you may find with your own children that if they don't prefer a food prepared a certain way, maybe from your culture, maybe they love it prepared a different way if you try a recipe from another culture. So so really experiencing getting on the internet and looking up recipes from different places that use different ingredients that you have easily accessible to you is a way to go on a trip when most of us cannot go on a trip. So so we're really talking about experiencing food from around the world while we're mostly at home.
That's right. And on the topic of peppers, another thing I just thought about is peppers are also used to make ground dried spices. So
right.
that is something for a kid that they might not think that, you know, something that's like this that grows on a plant could also be a spice that we would put in our cooking. So that's just another way with peppers specifically that you can show your kids, like, not only might we eat it raw or cook it, but it could also be dried and ground down to flavor our food in another way.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So we always try to include literacy points with whatever foods we're learning about. You know, reading is the basis for everything in society. So we really want our kids to become proficient readers and to develop a love for reading. And so, so we will always have a couple of different books that we recommend that you check out. This one is a real favorite of mine. This is How Are You Peeling? Get it? How Are You Peeling? But it's a book about feelings, and you can see that this artist does an incredible job turning fruits and vegetables into really fun faces. So you'll see that on there. Also on your list is a book called Plants Feed Me, and this is one I highly recommend to everybody to have in their library because it really goes through all kinds of different fruits and vegetables, the different parts of the plants that we eat, and really talks about how, you know, we plant the plants and then the plants feed us. And so really it just connects us to the earth in a really important way. So definitely check out reading resources. And of course, you'll want to investigate whether Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater would be a good book to add to your library, because that will help you as you parent in the kitchen. It will show you all of these tips that we're going to be, and the principles that we're going to be covering throughout this series. So today was Mindfully, but the book follows along with all of those really important principles.
Right, and reading is another way too that you can engage with food in a little bit more far off way. So we talked a lot about really getting in there, but when you're reading, you may not have the actual food there. So especially for a kid who's very hesitant, reading about a food and learning about it might be that first step to get them towards touching and smelling, and then eventually tasting and trying that food on its own or in a recipe that you've made together. So those are,
we need to see if there's some questions we can answer in the chat.
This is what I'm going to do.
Okay, let's move some stuff out of the way.
We're gonna move this stuff, and
we'll get the laptop closer so that we can answer some questions.
Okay, we'll move this hummus.
Okay, be a little closer and answer any questions. And I think Dr. Yum is also able to answer questions too.
Yeah, so we'll try to tag team and answer your questions. So do we want to start with the chat first? Okay, so first question says, please give tips that can encourage my child who's autistic to do fine motor skills and gross motor skills. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer this one. On the fine motor skills, just like I explained with using those tweezers, also just tearing foods. So leafy greens are great for this experience, and you can then use those greens right into your recipes. So whenever you're preparing kale, spinach, collard greens, Swiss chard, any kind of green that you're going to be using, pass them, have your children wash them, dry them, and then tear them into tiny pieces ready for your recipe. Any action that you do with this will build these muscles. Now, remember, the motor muscles start from big, your gross motor muscles, moving to the small. So really, if you don't have these built first, it's harder to get it directed into here. So at school, what we do to build gross motor is we do a lot of standing and painting at the easel. If you don't have an easel at home, that's fine. Get a bucket of water, send your kid outside with a paintbrush and have them paint the house or paint the fence. So anytime you're building these big muscles here, your gross motor muscles, then it translates and starts to build into the fine motor. So you'll want to look at ways that you can do heavy work, pushing, any type of, if you have something heavy outside that your children can push around the yard, that will build these muscles here, hanging from the jungle gym. So a lot of times what we think about with preschoolers is that they're just playing, but really their playing is their development. So send them outside to play, to work, to build these muscles so that they can then direct that into fine motor.
And if we're talking about food, cooking is a great part of that, but gardening is a great part of that too. So if you have the opportunity to either plant your own garden or work with a farm or something, or a gardener that that's a great way that you can work on those
pulling weeds and carrying stuff around the garden.
And then it's also involved with food as well.
Yeah.
So you're kind of doing both at the same time, which is really great.
Great point. Okay,
what I know too about preschoolers, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, what I know about preschoolers too, and I love all of the suggestions, because preschoolers love to be helpful, right? They're great helpers and they want to be able to contribute, and it makes them feel good to be able to contribute. And so one of the things we talk about in the book for gross motor is to give children a small broom so that they can help with sweeping. And that's another good fine motor skill in the kitchen around cleanup time. And maybe there's nothing for them to actually sweep, but you can take bits of tissue paper or gift wrap and kind of put them on the floor and then have kids help sweep those up. And that's some other fine motor work around cleanup time that you can incorporate into your routine too.
All right, so the next question is about the names of the books that we recommended. So that is on your handout. So
yep, it's at the very bottom of your handout. If you can see right here, the resources, so they're listed right on your handout here.
So that will be there for you, but I'll read them again to you as well. It's How Are You Peeling? Plants Feed Me, and then Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater, which is Dr. Fernando's book. Okay, and then the next one is how to inculcate the habit of eating, especially vegetables, which they don't like. So this is a big question, and it's kind of a lot of what we're going to be talking about this whole series. So definitely come to all of the sessions if you're able to, because all of these principles will help. But as far as what we talked about today, the experience, cooking, touching, seeing, feeling, smelling, all of those things are kind of those foundations that you build upon till you get that taste.
Yeah.
So if you're
sometimes they just really have to get comfortable with the smells and with the feel, and then even getting used to it being on their plate sometimes is a step. So we're going to be walking you through all of these ways to hopefully get to that point where you've built enough familiarity and comfort that your children will be experiencing more foods.
Okay.
Oh, we don't have a handout. Okay. We'll make sure that
I think it's for you to download. I don't know the details on that.
I don't know how you get it to download, but we will make sure that you all get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We also have a couple raised hands, so do we want to try to do those and then we can go back to chat?
Do you want to hear on my daughter's 5 years old, doesn't like to change the food she eats, mainly eats chicken, doesn't like to explore meat or fish, showing her real fish, which might be encouraging. May or may not be encouraging. Okay.
Might not be.
Yeah, that might not be.
So I
Okay.
can introduce the concept of food chaining. So that might be helpful with meats, is to introduce a flavor or a texture to a food that a child is learning to eat, and chaining that to a food or a texture that a child already likes. So I'll give you an example of this. We have a recipe on our website for a salmon dish, and we use a familiar flavor, which is citrus. So using orange. A lot of kids love that sweet, tart taste of oranges and orange juice. They're familiar with that because they may eat oranges or they may drink orange juice. And so we use those flavors to introduce fish to children. And so this is a concept we use all the time when we're teaching children. I'll give you another example of using texture. So many children have hesitancy when they're first introduced to leafy green vegetables like kale and spinach. But many children also enjoy crispy textures like chips. So salty, crispy textures. So what we do in our kitchen is we will bake leaves of kale and we'll make a chip out of it. And so children then feel more comfortable with the leafy green because it feels like that chip, that crispy, salty texture and flavor that they enjoy. So using a flavor that your child might like for instance, a salsa with mango, with some peppers, it's a little bit sweet and familiar, and serving it with the fish might be helpful. And then once the child has that first experience where they are encouraged, then you can start to remove the food chain later as they develop a taste. So as children try food, they will feel encouraged, and it actually changes the way they taste food, so that fish eventually may taste pleasant enough that you may be able to remove that food chain.
And also thinking about different preparations. So it was mentioned about, like, seeing a real fish might not be encouraging. That might also be the case when we're thinking about the recipes we're making. So having a large like fillet of fish versus having some sort of fish or seafood in a stew or a curry or a stir fry mixed in with a bunch of things, or cubed up and on a skewer. There all those different shapes and ways that it's incorporated, in addition to the flavor part, also just the way it looks and how it's interacting with the rest of the meal.
And the other thing that I think parents tend to miss the mark on is amounts. And really, when children are first learning about foods, you don't want to overwhelm them with a large amount of something on their plate. So we will talk more about that too. But just make sure that the experience of learning is really about just tasting, and it might not be a large amount, and we want to celebrate any type of win that we can get with experiencing that.
Okay, the next question is, what are the differences between fine motor skills and gross motor skills? Do you want to explain?
Okay, so gross motor is all of your large muscles in your body. So muscles for running, for pulling, for lifting. Those are all of your gross motor muscles, the large muscle systems. The fine motor is when you have to get down to the small muscles that are more intricate movements. It's a lot harder for children to learn to manipulate a pencil or a pen because it's such a fine skill. Even cutting with scissors is a fine skill. So all of those coordinations, those fine motor skills are built upon the strength of your core and your large muscle groups. So you really want to be doing lots of active movement with young children. They should not be sitting around a lot, because that is a way to really have that slumpy core and a weak body. So we're always looking for kids to be really strengthening that. So things like yoga experiences, which you can find online, any type of outdoor movement, riding your scooter, riding your bike, going on a swing and pumping your legs, holding on and pumping your legs. Those are all going to build those big muscle groups. And the strength of those big muscle groups and your body core is what is going to allow your child to then refine those skills into the fine motor muscles, which are here.
I would like to add too that, as you said, Wendy, these skills build upon each other. So you can't develop fine motor skills until you have a certain base of gross motor skills. And I wanted to just mention too that oral motor skills are an extension of fine motor skills too. So we talked about how feeding is a developmental process, and part of that development is developing those fine motor movements of your mouth and all of the muscles that are involved in swallowing. And so when you're teaching a child to eat for the first time, they have to be building those skills in tandem. They have to be able to have the gross motor function to sit in a feeding chair properly, so that then they can develop those swallowing skills and to be able to learn how to eat more complex texture as you're advancing those solids. And I just wanted to say that if any of our viewers have babies and want to learn about development, we have a baby food webinar that is free on our website for anyone to access, that explains how you introduce solids to those much younger, newer eaters, and how to understand how feeding development plays into that.
Yeah, and I'll add that chewing, I think parents sometimes get stuck into that feeding their children to soft food all the time. And so, so really experiencing those carrot sticks and having to really bite into something is what's going to build that chewing skills too. It takes a lot of coordination to bite something, chew it, manipulate it around in your mouth and your tongue, and actually swallow it. So, so we're always talking about, just making sure that you're introducing a complex variety of tastes and textures throughout your feeding. Yeah.
Okay, and we have another question here about dried fruits and nuts. So it says, what type of dried fruits are good for a 3-year-old? I'm limited to walnuts and almonds. Should we give them every day? If so, how many in a day? Name a few dried fruits that are good for their health. So as far as my take on this question, I wouldn't think of necessarily dried fruits as which ones are better, which fruits or nuts and seeds, which ones are better. It's good to have a variety of foods. So any types of dried fruits, nuts and seeds that you enjoy or that you want to incorporate into your meals are great. They all have a little bit of, different stuff in them in terms of nutrition. But when you eat a variety and you're getting a little bit of a lot of different things, then you're getting the benefit of all of those differences. And then also, as far as specifically for a 3-year-old, as long as their, oral motor development is good and all that stuff, it really isn't any specific food being better for a 3-year-old. It's all the foods. So we really believe in one meal for one family. Kids' foods and grown-up foods are really the same thing. And so we want kids to be eating everything that we're eating. The one thing with dry fruits, they can be sticky. So you want to be aware as far as teeth goes, which maybe Dr. Fernando can talk a little bit.
So when you're talking about like dates and raisins and apricots and those dried fruits, they do contain natural sugars. So, so you want to just make sure that when you're having those foods, that you're also then going to be cleaning the teeth. And we'll let Dr. Yum take this.
Yeah, thank you. I did, it did come to mind that at least in the US, many dried fruits do contain a lot of added sugars, and some fruits do not. So making sure that you're not doing too many foods that are overly sweet or have a lot of added sugar might be helpful. And then in terms of just 3-year-olds in general, making sure that we're not offering foods that could present a choking hazard. So if you're doing large, say dried apricots, you may want to cut those into smaller, more manageable pieces. Because they are a little bit tough to chew, you don't want to present a choking hazard. Same thing if you're doing larger nuts. Most nuts are going to be small and soft enough that kids, they have their 1 and 2 year molars, so they should be able to chew through them. But if there are larger nuts, you may want to either grind those down or cut those into smaller pieces so they don't present a choking hazard and they're safe.
Okay, so we have a couple more. So I think we can get through the next 2 and then wrap up. So any food that would help increase focus in ADD, intellectual disability, 10-year-old girl. So as
Maybe
far
the balance.
yeah, so there aren't really any specific foods that help with focus as far as the nutrition goes, but having a just overall healthy diet, having a well-rounded diet, eating a lot of different foods, not having a lot of added sugars like we talked about before, all of those things just in general can help kids to just feel better, be able to focus, having enough food to eat, having regular meals. Those things are really important. So it's more about the big picture. It's about looking at the diet as a whole and overall it being healthy rather than one specific food that can really make a difference.
Yeah, and I would add like scheduled meals and snacks so that eating times versus learning times or growing times are a separate thing, and everyone can count on we're going to be hungry when we get to this snack time, and then we're going to have a non-eating time, and then we'll be hungry again when it's this meal time, and each time making sure that your meal or snack is complete, that it doesn't just have one thing, that we have a well-rounded snack.
Okay, and then the last.
I think we were going to probably take the next several questions offline since we're
Okay.
at our time limit now. And I think those will be available on the webinar app, I believe.
Right.
We'll do our best to get to all these questions and provide answers for you. And I really hope that many of you will come back next week for our second session, where we will be exploring a lot of these concepts again, and in a little bit more depth, and we will visit a new parenting principle as well. We have 6 sessions, and we're hoping that a lot of you will tune into all of the sessions so that you really get a complete view of how you can parent joyfully around food during this pandemic. Again, thank you to the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority for their help with bringing this webinar to you. And we hope to see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.